Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our new moon in sidereal Pisces. It's coming this Thursday, March 31st. It's going to be at 8:24 p.m. Hawaii time, which is 11:24 p.m. with Pacific Daylight Time. And so, therefore, it's going to be actually on the first in many other locations, basically everywhere east of Pacific time. It'll be the next day, it'll be on April 1st. And this new moon is setting off a cycle of Piscean energy, but we also have had the sun in Pisces for a couple weeks. So it's also a continuation of some of the energy that we've already been experiencing. This is a time when our full moons are actually coming before the new moon. So the full moon in Virgo, which showed the opposite energy of Pisces, actually came before the new moon cycle itself, which is setting off this Piscean energy. And Pisces is really where we are in a state of merging. If we look at the whole zodiac of constellations and we see how each sign leads into the next, the sign before Pisces is Aquarius, where we're really seeing society at large. We're really looking at the big picture and how it involves everybody and everyone. And once we get into Pisces, we start to even blur those individual lines. So not just seeing everybody and everything and holding space for that, but starting to like blur the lines that separate everything and everybody and everyone so that it's all one, because ultimately that's where we're trying to go back to, right? That all oneness. And the particular star that this new moon is in is called Revati, and it's the final nakshatra of the 27 nakshatras. It's where we are walking each other home. So there's a quality of peace here. There's a quality of arrival, and there's a quality of that final leg of a journey where we've done a lot of hard work and we've put in our energy and we've made all the different things that we've had to do, and now there's like a surrender in that final walk. Like perhaps there's still going to be some monstrous dragon or something that we have to face along the way, but ultimately at that point our energy is only so much, and we can't get too excited or too deflated by anything that might be happening. We're really in a state of peace at that point, just if from nothing else, the long haul before. It's storming, some serious cats and dogs behind me right now, so hopefully you can hear me over the roar of the rain, which is pounding down all of a sudden as I do this. So the other thing is we've had a lot of other shifts going on in the sky. Some of them really recent, like March 16th, which was right before that full moon. We had the nodes change signs. So we had the north node Rahu move into Aries, the south node move into Libra. If you're not on my email list already and you would like to find out how that shift affects you, it will affect all of us for the next year and a half. I actually did a report on how it's going to affect each person for their individual rising sign. And if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get that report right away. But the other planets that have been moving in the sky and the universe, it's also Mars and Venus. So they were neck and neck for quite some time, and they're starting to have a little distance between the two of them, but they're also inching towards Saturn in the sky. And particularly Mars is slower moving than Venus. So we're going to see Mars hitting Saturn in just a few days here. And this is this is a situation that can feel pretty intense. They're two planets that are considered the harshest malefics, like the most the least feel good energy, the most sort of negative consequences or way in which we experience the energy. And they are also very inimical to one another. So there's an energy of just clash when these two come together. For this past week, we've had Venus sandwiched in between them, and we've even had the moon pass through. So we might have had more feelings within our heart or within our relationships that feel this Saturn Mars coming together. So we got kind of squished between them for a couple of days there. The rain is starting to die down. I can speak a little softer. But now that they're actually physically coming together, we'll see more of the outcomes of their coinciding. So when it was the moon, we could feel it. And actually when the moon was there, Venus was also there. So it was a dual situation. When it's Venus, perhaps our relationships were feeling really stuck between the fight and the flight, or whatever Venus rules for you personally. For me, it's my ruling planet. So I felt it within myself. But as the two come together, as Saturn and Mars come together, we're going to see more external activity representing this. And really, it's Saturn as a force of time. Saturn is where we have the awareness of time that we need in order to commit to something. Because if we had infinite time, we wouldn't commit to anything because we could just do it another time. But if we know, okay, we only have this much time and there's only so many things you can do in that amount of time, that's when you become more diligent, right? That's when you become hardworking. It's when you commit to something and see it through. And it's where you humble yourself enough to realize that your time is limited, your energy is limited, your body is limited, like literally the amount of time you're going to have in this body is limited. And your resources are limited. So that limitation, that quality of limitations that Saturn draws around us and makes us very aware of, is the very thing that gets us to commit to something, that gets us to work hard, that gets us to show up for something. It's also the part of us that hesitates, that wants more time before we make a decision, more time before we commit, because we feel like we're going to commit to something for a long time. Saturn does everything for long periods of time. Its retrograde cycles are long, its transits are long, it's there for a long time. And so if we're going to do the Saturn thing with something, we want to be sure. And so we take our time, we hesitate. And sometimes in that hesitation, we miss our chance. Right? Sometimes you need to jump on something as soon as it's available. Saturn's in his own sign of Capricorn right now. So there's a lot of awareness of the time that we have, the limits on that time. And it's really appropriate awareness. It's like people are dying and do die, and we might be one of them, or these people close to us might be one of them. And it's, an awareness of our aging, of the fact that we won't be young forever, that we need to take care of our bodies, that injuries we have might not heal as quickly or as well the older that we get. It's also an awareness of how much we don't actually have, how much is illusion in our life, that, that relationship we think we have, or that job we think we have, or even that friendship we think we have can be gone in an instant. It could be there 1 minute and then the next minute it's not there anymore. Somebody could die, or they could be sick, or they could leave you, or it could just change, right? Feelings can just change. So this idea that we don't have a lot of control, and the only control we do have is how we direct our time, how we spend our energy, and how thoughtfully and carefully and slowly we move through what we do, how methodical we can be, especially in Capricorn, of Saturn's two signs. Capricorn really has that more methodical approach. Mars in Capricorn is exalted. It's in its highest state. It's in the state where there's the most capacity to channel that energy of Mars, that fire, that passion, that discipline, that courage, that action, and what can become anger if it's not properly channeled. And that fire goes into an earthbound place with a function. It's useful. If nothing else, Capricorn, it's like must be useful towards survival, towards, literally living, not enjoyment and pleasure and all these kind of things and a lot of wants. It's very need-based. And so that energy really has somewhere to go and something productive to do. And so it functions really well. When an exalted planet is joined the ruler of that sign, it doesn't like it as much as we might think. We might think it's great when the exalted planet has the landlord there, but actually the way it feels is a little bit stifling, because it's like, hey, dude, I do this thing really well. I don't really need your help. I know what I'm doing. I'm creating a fire channel. I'm pouring my fire into the channel. This is where it's going. I know what I'm doing. Whereas Saturn's there going, are you sure? Are you doing it right? Is it okay? Is it, and all the things that Saturn does, which it's also doing well and carefully. It's important to take note and take heed and be careful and all those things that Saturn does. But Mars doesn't need that. Mars's skill is there and doesn't need that extra thing. And that extra thing can actually take away from the genius, can actually take away from its skill level in this place. So really no planets actually like to be together. There's a quality of just wanting space. It's like you love your best friend, but do you want them to sit in the same chair as you? Probably not, right? You probably want your own chair. It's like just wanting your own room to do your thing that you need to do. The only time we really see a planet benefiting from another planet being joined is if it's debilitated, if it's in its lowest state where it's handicapped, then the ruler can actually help, or an exalted planet can actually help, because that planet really does need help. It's like, please, throw me a line, help me out. So with Mars and Saturn being together, Mars is the one that's actually in stronger dignity because it's exalted, even though Saturn's in his own sign. Also, Saturn's been in his own sign since January of 2020. So we've had a lot of that lesson, and Saturn's teetering out. He's moving into Aquarius for 2.5 months before he comes back into Capricorn, because Saturn, you always got to get that lesson really good. They got to make sure we come back through and learn again. So Saturn's also in a state where he's becoming a little bit less stable, right? He's moving towards changing signs, albeit into his own other sign of Aquarius. So Mars is doing, is in a higher position, is in a stronger position, but his degrees are lower. He's the one who's faster moving. So he's coming up on Saturn and will overcome Saturn. And this is, and I suppose I could show the chart. I meant to show the chart a long time ago, but this is a new moon in Pisces. So we forget things. So we can see Saturn's here at 2521, and Saturn, is at 2753, and Mars is at 2521, and Mars is the faster moving planet. So he's going to move past Saturn. Basically, and let's look at the exact time of this. We have there Mars overtook it on April 4th. He overtook it, and it might have been a little before that, but it looked like not. Yeah, 2737, and then a day later, April 4th, Mars is past Saturn. So we're looking at like the 3rd and the 4th, where they're the most tight degrees. But once he passes that energy, that buildup of them meeting starts to deflate a little, like instantly. So the building up is harder. So right now where we are, like the new moon on the 31st, 1st, depending on where you are, the 2nd, 3rd, these days are the big buildup between Saturn and Mars coming together. And this is really where we see that part of us that wants to just do it no matter what, just get in there and fight. Who knows, but start throwing your fists first, or just start moving, start acting first, is at odds with the part of us that's like, well, we got to be careful and be really safe about this. Typically speaking, these two planets, when they come together, create a lot of calamity or clash, because there's an icy quality to Saturn, or a cold quality. There's a fiery quality to Mars, and the two together create sort of explosive energy when those two places that are so fear-based and so root chakra-based and survival-based come together. That can really happen. Now, in a survivalist sign like Capricorn, it's like, oh my God, this is going to be even worse, right? We're really going to be facing life, death, and survival. Well, on one hand, yes, it's possibly true that the stakes are so survival oriented. The sign is an earth sign. So we see that really taking place in a tangible way on the earth. And we can really see how both of these energies, in their intelligence, what they do is harsh, right? Like in the intelligence of Mars, in his greatest intelligence, he distinguishes you to strengthen yourself, to fight, right? To fight an inner or an outer battle. What Saturn is ultimately doing is, whittling away our attachments by humbling us through time and all the challenges that come with that. So in their intelligence, the experience is actually challenging still. Even when they're operating in intelligent ways, they don't give us good things like Jupiter and Venus and some of the other planets. They give us harsh things, but they give it to us in a positive dignity or positive intelligence so that it's helping us move closer to truth, which is ultimately the goal of our lives. So is it cataclysmic? Is it a catastrophe? Or is it actually breaking us free from something that's been holding us for a long time? It'll depend on where it's happening in your chart, what house this is for you. It'll depend on the quality of these two planets for you in your chart, like how much intelligence you have with Mars and how much intelligence you have with Saturn. It will depend on if you have any planets here in Capricorn. There's a lot of different variables that will come into play as to how positive or negative of an effect this will have on you. But we can certainly see that it's playing out in the greater world, right? We can see, I can barely stand to give any more breath to something that happened at the Oscars, but with the slap and the fight and the remark or whatever that happened with Chris Rock and Will Smith, we can see it on a much bigger and much more significant scale with Russia and Ukraine. We can see that there is this energy coming together of people's fears and their fight and their capacity to fight when they are afraid of death or when they are afraid of something that feels like death. Mix this with the fact that Rahu has moved into Aries, and we see that, this sort of dispersive quality of Rahu, this airy quality, and this sort of fanatical, obsessive quality that is quite delusional often, and really about identity, right? It has this quality of foreignness, like it's foreign, it's different, and not really wanting to be pegged or named itself. In the sign of Aries, where we fight, where we strengthen ourselves, where we can be very militant and aggressive, and where we start things that we don't necessarily plan on finishing. This is going to be part of the issue. A bigger part of the issue in many ways than even just Mars and Saturn coming together is the fact that there's this overblown concept of what we need to strengthen ourselves against and how action oriented we need to be. So the fact that these two are actually in Saturn sign of Capricorn is a positive thing in that there is a level of caution available. And that Saturn's there cautioning Mars, even though Mars is exalted, because this Rahu and Aries can really exacerbate and confuse what it is that's actually happening and see it in a much more blown out of proportion, exaggerated way. We also have, on this, and I've moved to April 4th because I was showing when Mars overtook Saturn, but I'm going to go back again and get us back to our new moon, which again, it's March 31st because it's Hawaii time, 8:24, which is 3 hours before Pacific time right now, Pacific daylight time, the change time. And then of course that's, even more as we get further east. But this picture shows us that we have all the planets between the nodes, Rahu and Ketu. So this is what we call Khalasapa Yoga. And I've talked about this at various other points because it's been going on for a while now. In fact, we'll be breaking out of it soon. But this is the time snake that the nodes create for us, where all the planets get smushed between these two nodes and we become more delusional with all the energy because all the planets are operating under the spell of the nodes. So each of the aspects of ourself have that quality. And when we think about our fight and our flight, and we think about our fear, and we think about our anger, we realize that it comes from other places, right? It comes from interactions we have with other people. It comes from something that happened to us at the grocery store or in a car. It comes from all this other stuff, the government, our beliefs about things. So, the Jupiter, the Venus, Mercury, Moon, and the Sun are not like out of the picture of what creates our anger and our fear. They play a part in that. So you can imagine when so many things are not as they seem, and we're in a state of really confusion with what actually is. There's so much illusion and so much confusion. It can be difficult to discern what is really a threat and what is an imagined threat. And that can prompt actual threats and actual fears that are legitimate. So all that delusion and confusion can create very real problems, right? And this is some of what we're seeing happen here. Also, when the nodes are like this, when it's moving through, we see all the planets are between Rahu, Ketu this way. The nodes move backwards. They're like these karmic points, and they mark where our eclipses are going to be, and they indicate that we're actually, as we're moving through life, we're creating karma in a forward fashion. Most of the time, we're experiencing the karmic experience in a backwards fashion, right? Opposite of that. And so Rahu is the initiating node on this Khalasapa Yoga, and it's in Aries, moving to Ketu in Libra. And one of the issues with this axis is the fact that Ketu in Libra is really pulling us away from, or having us not engage in, diplomacy, in compromise, in harmony, beauty, getting along, all the Libran qualities that feel, to me at least, to be desperately needed in today's time, is where we're pulling away from, where we're saying, oh, we've done a lot of that. We've been so diplomatic. We've been so compromising. Now we need to use force, and now we need to get our way, and we need to just do it our way without looking and seeing how it affects anyone else. And remember, this is a transit that is happening to everyone. These are transits. So they are not just happening to, Vladimir Putin. They are happening to you. They are happening to me. They are happening to every single person making choices and decisions for the United States government. They're happening to all the individual people on the ground running in each of these different situations. And they're happening to your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or your partner or your child or your teacher or whoever else is in your life. So everyone experiences these things. And that's what makes transits more challenging, because not only do you not have a lifetime to work on the energy of, healing whatever is challenged, you also are sharing that situation with everyone else. So everyone else is feeling that same way as you are. And so you're aggressive, they're aggressive too, right? It's not like they're being diplomatic to make up for your aggression. So this is one of the things that we need to realize in transits, is that they can be very challenging for us as a collective, especially when it's one like this, that's exacerbating, blowing up, exaggerating, dispersing, fiery, intense, militant, angry action, and pulling away from, like I said, beauty, harmony, compromise, and diplomacy. But in this Khalasarpa, it's moving the energy towards that south node. So it's trying to complete karma. With new karma, it's trying to fix old karma. So why don't we start a war to create diplomacy? Why don't we battle someone, because that will make us get along, because that'll force us to get along. And obviously that's not how it works, right? And at some point there'll be a Khalasarpa Yoga where the planets all end up on this side of it, and we'll have a different experience. We'll be moving from that end to that end. But we're at the very beginning of this, and we haven't yet had an eclipse in this cycle, which is really when it gets activated, when we have an eclipse. And we'll see that when we end up in our full and new moons that fall into this Aries area, because that will be the next thing coming, right? We're moving this way. So we'll have a chance to really initiate this karmic energy soon. But for right now, we have to realize the delusion is very present. And this Saturn and Mars coming together can create a crash or a battle or an explosion that can really instigate all these other things happening, and create an embattled landscape, because it's literally Capricorn, it's the earth, it's the ground, it's so we see this physically happening in maybe even like a geological way, because of the fact that it's an earth sign like this. So that's the the harshest thing that's coming our way, and it's coming right away. So it's important to realize The other thing that's important to understand is not only are we in this Khalasapa Yoga, but the moon and sun and even Mercury now are all in Pisces, where we are a little bit out at sea. We're not totally present with the details. It's the opposite of that Virgo full moon we had 2 weeks ago, where we wanted to focus on the details and focus on our health and focus on all things. In Pisces, it's like, what does it matter? Because everything's so seamless, because there's so few lines drawn around everything dividing it, we have a quality of like, what's the difference? What's the difference between this or that? What's the point of that or this? It doesn't matter because it's all the same. It's a recognition of the oneness of life, which is an important recognition to have. But of course, we're in this playing field, we're in this play. And if we're going to play in it, which means engage in it, other than just, stepping out and sitting on a mountaintop or becoming somebody who just meditates for their whole life. If we're going to engage in it, we do need to recognize some lines. We do need to recognize and take care of some details in order to take care of our bodies, in order to take care of our relationships, and to keep ourselves afloat. So that quality of being sort of spaced out and not totally here and now and more in another realm can also create a lot of problems, because if we're not present with the details and we're kind of like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, then when something explodes, we're surprised because we were busy, picnicking out at sea and having a spiritual experience. And so that's one of the things that we need to look out for too, is just not really being present with the details and how many foibles come from that in our lives, and how many things can come around and end up hitting us on the head because we just didn't pay enough attention. Sun and moon coming together here, as I said, in Revati. And the beauty of Revati is it is a star that brings a lot of gentle, nourishing energy. It's ruled by Pushan, and he's the shepherd, and he nurtures and guides and protects the animals to find their way home. So there's a very protective quality here. This is also a nakshatra of wealth, much like Dhanista, where Venus is at the moment. This is a prosperous nakshatra that helps bring prosperity and wealth, again, in a gentle way. And if we even think of animals in terms of, if it was like a shepherd, right, they would be sheep or something that would account for some kind of money or some kind of wealth to the owner of said sheep and ushering them home. You can even think in terms of that. Mercury is not in Revati. Mercury is in Uttara Bhadrapada. It's actually very close to its state of exact debilitation here, in its place. And the reason Mercury is debilitated in Pisces is because of that sort of out to sea quality and the lack of lines, the lack of boxes that things get put in with our communication and with the information that comes into our head, and our discernment, our capacity to sort of separate facts from fiction and kind of put things, okay, this is this kind of information, this is this kind of information, this is this kind of information, and sort it out and organize it. With Pisces, it can get confusing because it's like, but none of the boxes really exist anyway. Everything's the same. Let's just put it all in. It all means the same anyway. It gets very confusing and muddled. And so we can see that our actual capacity to speak on things, which is a big part of creating things like diplomacy, right? Or getting along with people, is going to be coming from a more emotional place. It's going to be more of this watery, maybe some spiritual qualities in it, maybe just more of an emotional drive, depending on the individuals involved, but not really clear. And perhaps the other person takes it funny because they're not really clear either, and they're not really understanding. Plus there's all this Rahu Ketu energy and this Khalasapa Yoga and all this like anger and fear coming together. So we can see that can really create some mishaps in communication, which is something to be aware of. And also Mercury is going to be very close to the sun. So it's combust, which means that it's, its energy is being like burned up by the sun. So we feel like we're not being heard, especially by authority figures, especially by people in authority positions. We feel like we're not being heard. So then what? Do we need to talk louder? Do we need to say it with a little song and dance and a hat on our head? Do we need to tell a joke? How can we be heard, or how could we be understood, which is really what we want when we're trying to be heard. So that can cause further issues. And then we have this Jupiter, Venus, and Aquarius, which Venus just stepped in. You can see it's only at 111 degrees. And Jupiter's quite far away. Jupiter's at the end. But Jupiter and Venus also have some struggle with each other because these are the two gurus. These are the two teachers. So kind of Saturn and Mars don't really get along. Well, Jupiter and Venus don't really get along. Venus is the teacher, the guru of the Asuras, who are the beings without light. Jupiter is the teacher of the Devas, who are the beings that are trying to live in the light, that are trying to live in more pure and holistic way. Now we can see that these are mythological characters that can be called asuras and that can be called devas. But within each of us, there's that part of us that's like trying to move towards our highest self, and that part of us that gets dragged down to our lowest self. And then the part of us that's sort of navigating both, which is called the human part, right? The part that's being human is having both of those elements. Well, these are hyper representations of these parts of ourselves. And Venus is representing the asuras because the premise is desire. And Jupiter is trying to show us this higher wisdom and this way to sort of divorce ourselves from our desire and to just only desire God or only desire truth or wisdom or a higher teaching. And these two together have different ways of approaching, moving us towards enlightenment. Venus is on the ground. It's like me and you, we're in the ring when you're in a relationship, when you're in a partnership, when you're even engaging with, a mother, father, or child, when you're with your friends. In these interpersonal relationships, we find out if our teachings work or not, right? We can have all the high teachings we want on a mountain, but can we come down to earth and continue to have those teachings while dealing with the fact that other people have different agendas than us, different desires than us, different wants and needs? All of a sudden, all of our shadowy things come out that were much easier to ignore when we were by ourselves up on the mountaintop. Jupiter keeps us attached to the highest wisdom, that highest state of being. It doesn't mean we're ever going to get there, but it does mean that there is a high to aim for, a high sense of truth to aim for, and we can aim for it, and we can get closer to it. But these two often find themselves at odds. Often our relationships pull us away from our highest wisdom, just like they force us to look at the fact that our wisdom isn't that great or that we really weren't that wise, or we aren't embodying our teachings, even if we have good teachings. Venus is often that force pulling us back down to earth, reminding us of that human nature, reminding us of our desire nature. And Jupiter is really trying to just expand up and find that other way. Now they're in Aquarius, where there's a quality that we're in it for society, for the world, for all the people. We're trying to make everything right for society. We're trying to create futuristic visions. We're trying to do all this stuff that really can fit in like a technological framework or be related to air and travel. And again, the future and this vision and the way things can be and the systems and architecture and ways that we could be doing it different. How was it not right from the past? What needs to be different, what needs to change. So in relationships, this is rather impersonal. It's not the most intimate placement for Venus. It's more like, what can we do for society together? It's more of a friend or ally kind of vibration with Venus. Although the dignity is not bad, Saturn and Venus are friendly, there's still that quality, that vibration is less about one-to-one relationships and more about how can we serve society. Jupiter in Aquarius is in less positive dignity, and both of them have Saturn nearby, so their dignity is raised. But separate from that, Jupiter in Aquarius is actually where our wisdom and our teachings is not so timeless. It's missing some of that forever quality that a true teaching would have. A true teaching stands the test of all time. It doesn't matter if you read it 5,000 years ago or you read it today. This is why the Vedic teachings are so powerful, because they were written 5,000 years ago and here we are today and they still ring true. Jupiter in Aquarius is beliefs and ideals around this time and this place and this society and what's right and not right in this society. So it's using actual factors, and those factors are changeable. They can switch sides, they can move. This could be right this day, this could be right tomorrow. We can't count on that. That's not lasting wisdom. It's like if you look at the two-party system in the United States of America and say, this sort of simplistic way that so many Americans view politics, like Democrats good, Republicans bad, or the reverse of that, whatever your belief system is. That's kind of an example of like a Jupiter and Aquarius belief. It's like, well, that's assuming that any one party is going to stay one way for all this time, or that a party could even be good or bad, that there isn't a bigger issue with the whole system to begin with. There's so many factors involved there that aren't being taken into account. It's like sticking a pin in about 50 different things and saying, oh, okay, but this is our truth right now, and we're going to work with this. It's very limited. It's very constricted. Now, in Aquarius, it's a lot less limited than it is in Capricorn, right? We had Jupiter in Capricorn already, and that was just about as restrictive as any of us need to have. To have in Aquarius, there's movement, there's air, there's vision. As I said, you can see the future, you can see where things can go. So there's potential for great insight into new ways of doing things that can be very big blessings to society. But as far as like a pure wisdom teaching, it's going to lack, because it can't be a pure wisdom teaching if it's of the here and now. And of the here and now, and facts and data can always be rearranged, changed, and all of that. I mean, and at this point, we can see that, right? That even things like a fact or data is under question, because there's so many ways to measure that. So neither of these two planets are in their highest, particularly their highest state here in Aquarius, but more importantly, their capacity to lead us or guide us and give us that higher wisdom is limited. Venus is going to actually be operating in a better way, where we at least will have a more humanitarian view, thinking of one another as brothers and sisters. How can we help each other out? How can we lend a hand? That's something that Venus does. Venus is, again, working in the world of relationships, the world with us. So Venus is there to lend a helping hand to the neighbor, to say, you know what, that person needs some help, or what can we do to help this section of society? And that's really a more functional realm for Venus to work within. Jupiter is, again, trying to attach us to high beliefs that can expand us out of here, not stick us in the hole of where we already are. Or even that trap of thinking that this is where we are and this is where we can go, but only envisioning it within the template of time and space that we're working with in this moment. Jupiter is also, I should say, in Purva Bhadrapada, which is where, actually the Mercury is now in Uttara Bhadrapada. Jupiter is in a star that really gives us awareness of this. So that it's actually his own star. It's his own nakshatra. So this is going to actually levy some of what I just said, because the quality of Purva Bhadrapada is to realize that we are beyond this body, and to actually have the recognition that I just illustrated, that I just spoke of the limitations of time and space and this specific reality. Jupiter and Purva Bhadrapada is the part of us that's like, oh yeah, this isn't actually truth. This isn't actually real. I need to break free of that. And it's going to be the bridge that brings him into his own sign of Pisces on April 13th. So we're going to really see that star of his own star carry us into the place where we really start to recognize how much of this time and place and story that we're living is man-made and constructed and not necessarily related to truth, and how much we could maybe dissolve some of those lines if we wanted to. So that's going to be a really positive shift for all of us when Jupiter transitions into his own sign of Pisces. There's a lot of information here. I've spoken for a long time, so I'm going to break now. But again, if you have not already signed up for my email list, and you will instantly receive Rahu in Aries, Ketu in Libra for all 12 rising signs. You'll get to see where that transit really affects you. Rahu shows where your energy is going in this 1.5 year cycle, and Ketu will show where you're pulling back from. And I have it written out for every single rising sign, so you can see really what houses it's affecting, what areas of your life it's affecting. And then also you'll get bi-monthly reports like this one for new and full moons sent directly to your inbox. So you won't have to, wait till a Facebook post pops up or something like that to get your info. It's at www.radhahomeyoga.com, and the link will be with the video. Blessings on your new moon in Pisces. Namaste.